Hello, everyone.
How do you three see that scaling? Into
I don't know
the
what
future?
Craig's talking about. Controversial topic? I
Will's
don't
probably
think
answering
at all. My name's Tyler Evans. I'm one of the founders of BTC Inc. Focused really on the investing side now. I'm the managing partner of our venture capital fund, the 2140 Bitcoin Ecosystem Fund, and we're investing actively in startups and also in liquid assets like Ordinals built on the Bitcoin network exclusively. So we've got an awesome panel. To kick things off, would each of you guys maybe introduce yourself and then we'll talk a little bit about your journeys into Ordinals. So Z, if you want to kick it off.
How's it going, everyone? Is this on? Yeah, it's on. Nice to meet everyone. Good to see everyone here. Packed house. This is awesome. I'm Zhouxun, co-founder of Magic Eden. So we're the main marketplace for Ordinals. Our history goes back a couple of years. Obviously, you might know us from the general NFT marketplace space on Solana, Polygon, and Ethereum. We're really, really bullish on all things Bitcoin, even before all of this stuff. So when this opportunity came around, it was a no-brainer for us, and I'm really excited to be here and talk more about Ordinals.
Awesome. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth. I don't think you're on.
Testing. Hello. Here we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Olson. I am head of growth at Xverse, which is the leading wallet for Ordinals and Bitcoin Web3. We are making it possible for you to be able to connect to apps on Bitcoin. So, for example, you can connect to Magic Eden, get yourself an OMB, let's go. And we are open source, non-custodial, with built-in ledger support. And you can kind of think of us like a MetaMask or a Phantom wallet for Bitcoin. So we're bringing that similar user experience to Bitcoin.
What's going on, everyone? I'm ZK Shark. I'm the founder of OMB, the first Ordinals project, first PFP project on Block 9 and Block 78. With total collection size is 2,100. And yeah, I've kind of was involved heavily in crypto on Wall Street. And then when Ordinals came out, I kind of bailed on NFTs and went full into Ordinals, started OMB, and now we're here.
Awesome, ZK. Well, before we talk about the Ordinals opportunity, I want to dig a little bit more on kind of like how you guys discovered Ordinals, what opportunity you saw initially, what was the spark that drew all you guys and your respective companies, which were some of the earliest movers in the Ordinal space, to see this opportunity when it was just starting to blossom. And maybe we'll start with you, ZK. What caught your attention? How did your Ordinals journey begin?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, I guess it all started with I was very active in trading NFTs and collecting art, and then I kind of had the thesis that really fine art is what is the best kind of advantage versus for NFTs. And yeah, I came across kind of the Ordinals white paper really early on. I read it, and I was like, wow, this is actually different. This is truly immutable standard. And kind of knowing NFTs well, the biggest problem with NFTs is that a lot of them are mutable. A lot of them are referencing off-chain data. And I saw inscriptions as like, okay, this is fully encapsulated. It's on Bitcoin. It's immutable. And when you really look at the opportunity on Bitcoin, take Solana and Polygon, times it by 10. That's not even at the market cap of Bitcoin. Double the size of Ethereum. And the actual Ordinals and inscriptions market was so young, and it just provided like a crazy asymmetric risk-reward opportunity. And it's also all about kind of decentralization and securing the node. Something I think really positive about Ordinals, it forces you to learn Bitcoin, forces you to learn what UTXOs are, especially if you're inscribing. I think over like 5,000 full nodes were activated in February alone. But yeah, that's kind of what made me really bullish on it, was that it's on Bitcoin, and it was just a superior standard to NFTs, in my opinion.
Yeah, so for us, I think the excitement we were seeing for Ordinals from within the Bitcoin community and beyond was something we hadn't seen in years. It was actually quite unprecedented. So at Xverse, we really wanted to capture that momentum. And at the time Ordinals came out, the infrastructure was essentially non-existent. Just to give you an idea, initially you had to own a node to inscribe. It would take hours, and you had to have more advanced knowledge about things like UTXO output. And even then, you weren't able to see the image of your ordinal and might accidentally send it away as a Satoshi payment. So there was a lot of low-hanging fruit in regards to opportunities to support and make improvements. And at Xverse, we were in a good position for that because we were already supporting NFTs at the layer 2 level. So supporting them on-chain already made sense for us. And in the matter of about 4 days, we put our heads down, working around the clock, essentially on pure adrenaline, and we're able to ship support. We were the first Ordinals wallet to support the protocol. So essentially, I would say we were in large part playing a major contribution to the growth of Ordinals in the early days. And we're really excited about what's still being built. It's still quite a nascent ecosystem. There's a lot of opportunity out there for those who are building. Come join us. And we're looking forward to continuing to support.
Yeah, I think for us, our origins is similar to ZK in that obviously, yeah, we're really deep in the NFT ecosystem specifically. But there's a couple of things that were really interesting to us. And there are two people in particular on our team that just spotted this early and were really, really interested in it. So one was Chartfu Monkey. I don't know if he's here somewhere. Chartfu. The other one is this guy Joe, who's our general counsel. Actually, so you'd think he's like a very buttoned up, like legal dude, which he is. But he's also one of the early, like really early in the Bitcoin community in New York, and like deep in that ecosystem. So when he spotted this, and he was very early in that original Ordinals Discord. Our thesis at Magic Eden has always been, we've always thought NFTs is the way to bring like way more people into crypto. And when I first got into crypto, I was like, man, everyone should want to be a part of this. Like at the time, it was only Bitcoin, and then obviously I got into other things too. And I still believe that actually. And so that's like the foundational layer. And then below that, we had this thesis similar to ZK about different types of assets will live on different chains. And you know, like some chains will have all kinds of like really, really cheap, I don't know, all kinds of like strange assets. But the stuff on Bitcoin should be the premium stuff. And we actually really, really believe that thesis. Because if you look at NFTs and other ecosystems, and like, yeah, we are guilty of this being a big marketplace on other chains, all the actual NFTs are just like images, and then it's like off-chain linking to some off-chain file storage, like IPFS. And on Bitcoin Ordinals, that's actually not true. Everything is like actually purely on-chain inscribed. And there's some purity about that I think is really, really amazing and really, really nice. It sort of brings everyone back to our roots. And then finally, it's kind of like, man, it's Bitcoin. Like, is anyone really going to fade Bitcoin here? Like, we got to be a part of this. So we were just generally very, very taken by the opportunity. And we jumped into it maybe a week after we discovered it. Took about 2-3 weeks to build the marketplace, which was very, very hard, but we got it done. And it's been amazing since. Yeah,
Z, can you talk a little bit more about that? What was that like going from, you know, account-based systems, other chains, to building in kind of a UTXO-based Ordinals infrastructure? What's that development process like?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing was we noticed everyone was trying to trade through this like Sheets OTC desk. I don't know whatever you want to call it.
Discord server.
Discord. Yeah. It's just like insane. When you see stuff like that, it always tells you that, yeah, people want something. They're willing to jump through some hoops. So for us as like a consumer-facing company, yeah, there's an opportunity there. So for us, yeah, the main difference obviously is that we're really used to working with smart contracts, whether it's like using Rust on Solana or Solidity on EVM. And obviously that's just very, very different kind of infrastructure on Bitcoin. So we started looking into like PSBTs, and then we're the first ones to come out with like an open source version of a marketplace based on that. And we're really proud of it. I think there's obviously more we want to do, but that was sort of the origin. Yeah.
Awesome. And maybe for people in the audience who aren't as familiar with Ordinals, can any of you guys kind of give a sense of the opportunity, the size, the user base, the economic activity that's happening at this layer on Bitcoin?
I think really zooming out and just really understanding kind of the basic principle that Ordinals are attracting people to Bitcoin that are not here necessarily for kind of the hard money argument. And, you know, especially in the early days of Ordinals, those are people that really weren't concerned necessarily about inflation or decentralization or centralized entities. These guys were kind of irrational collectors of art. They wanted to join a community. And I think when you zoom out, Bitcoin really is synonymous with crypto. When people think about cryptocurrency, usually they think of Bitcoin first. And I think as kind of this space continues, when people think about digital assets, they're going to think about ordinals first. And instead of, when you really look at it as an onboarding mechanism to Bitcoin, that's kind of the most bullish thing. I'll leave it at that, I think,
How about in terms of kind of your guys' vantage point in the ecosystem, the stuff your teams are working on, the development, the infrastructure? What gets you excited looking ahead for the rest of the year in Ordinals?
I can touch on this in regard to infrastructure. So at Xverse, we actually pioneered Sats Connect API. This is a Bitcoin API that's open source, so you can go ahead and start building on it. And this enabled the first way to be able, the only way essentially to be able to do trustless swaps for ordinals, things like PSBTs and message signing. So it's been really exciting for us to be able to support builders. And in a little alpha here also, we actually recently stealth launched an inscription service because we saw really a need to improve the whole inscription process. Just to give you an idea, initially it would take a lot of time to inscribe, and we really wanted to also lower the fees. So now you can also inscribe within the course of one block. So it's one block completion. So that's about 10 minutes. And you can immediately see your transaction in the mempool. So without getting too technical, basically a lot of really interesting features because the inscription process is so essential to ordinals and meta protocols. And we want to continue to support builders and development within the ordinals ecosystem because essentially this is what's bringing new applications and new users into the ecosystem, and hopefully users that will also be using Xverse and really getting adopted into Bitcoin. So yeah, we're really excited for what's being built, and again, if you're a builder out there, would love to connect with you and would love to build together.
Yeah, for us, I think there's a couple of things. One, like the overarching goal for us is basically let's bring more usage to the Bitcoin network. And us as a consumer-facing product, we're in a unique position to actually help make that happen. The main way that we are thinking about doing that is basically lean into new and different ways of collectability on Bitcoin. And if you look at, I don't know how much people follow NFT stuff in other ecosystems, but I would say for other NFTs, it's like more one-dimensional in the sense of you create a collection or you mint something, mint an image, and that's like the extent to which that collectability basically exists. On Bitcoin, it's on Ordinals, it's so much more diverse and richer than that. Like, to give you one concrete example, we launched this thing yesterday called a Rare Sat Marketplace. And there's all these different like interesting attributes of sats where people have placed some sense of premium. There's like social consensus around like some premium value around these Satoshis given their history. So maybe they were like a pizza sat or like block 78 or something, right? They've gone through something in Bitcoin's history that was momentous. And creators are using those things to inscribe stuff into them. And we think that's really cool because that adds another layer of collectability that is not possible elsewhere. And if that is a way to bring more people into Bitcoin and Ordinals, we think that's just generally really, really good for the network and also just really, really good for crypto. So that's basically the stuff that we are working on, leaning into other new ways of driving collectability use cases, and then using that as the wedge to then bring in more people to come and try it.
More collectability, for sure. In addition to, so we've got, in the Ordinals landscape, we've got like the community stuff like OMB. We've got the art, like one-of-one kind of original pieces of art. We've got the rare Satoshis. And then we also have fungible tokens coming to Bitcoin as meta protocols. We have the BRC-20 standard, which used kind of the Ordinals envelope to launch a token protocol and got a lot of traction early. And we've got a bunch of proposals out there for other ways to bring fungible tokens to Bitcoin. What do you guys think of the landscape, and what sort of adoption or traction or excitement do you have around the fungible opportunity?
What do you guys think about BRC-20?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bitcoin is not really a place for shitcoins. I think BRC-20 started out as an experiment. That's the first line of the white paper, if you guys read it. You know, I have a ton of respect for Domo. But at the end of the day, I view it as experimentation. And I don't think, BRC20 or types of fungible standards similar to that have like a long future, but it really teaches you a lot about the network, kind of about indexing, and sets it up for when there's a real utility to kind of build on that technology. But in the meantime, I think it really is a great onboarding mechanism. Kind of look at the unique wallets that are just trying to get rich on ETH and Solana. Not necessarily that you want that activity on Bitcoin, but it's kind of convincing enough for them to set up an Xverse wallet and check out Magic Eden or something. It's a good onboarding mechanism, but I don't think like the technology is there to really build real infrastructure on it yet. I mean, you see like with the BitVM paper and kind of more standards on top of it, like it's growing, it's attracting developers, there's funding. So I think it's still really early days, and kind of viewing it as an onboarding mechanism to Bitcoin and is the best way to look at it, but I think it's got a long way to go.
Mm-hmm.
I can touch on that as well. I think these token standards, BRC20 and Runes also, there's a new blog out from Casey Rodomar, who's the creator of Ordinals. He's also proposed this kind of token standard for Bitcoin. I think what's interesting about these, and something that we kind of all have to wrestle with here, is that people kind of like to have this kind of gamification, token standards, and it's kind of maybe a similar behavior that you might compare to something like gambling, which kind of a hot take, but gambling's been around for hundreds of years. We've seen this at casinos. We see this kind of activity sort of happening on Ethereum, and in some ways, I think we might even potentially embrace this happening on Bitcoin, because this could actually be benefiting the miners in regards to network security and also bringing more users in. I think ultimately this makes us, we kind of have to pick our poison here. If this is sort of inevitable sort of activity and behavior that people want, what can we do? And that's kind of what I like what Casey's come out with in regards to Runes, is because this is proposing some ways to solve the congestion issues. And also with Runes, there's opportunity to do more things like potential for interacting with L2s, like Lightning and scalability. So ultimately, I think the question here is, will Runes be adopted? And the market can be so fickle. With stamps, how many of you are familiar with stamps? Just kind of curious. Stamps, anybody? Okay, so I mean, it's a fairly credible protocol, and but we just haven't seen that kind of same excitement and adoption. Whereas BRC20s are now at something like a $70 million market cap. So the market can be quite fickle with these things. But I will say with Runes, having Casey behind it, I think it does stand a fighting chance. And certainly at Xverse, we're already supporting BRC20 tokens, so it makes sense, and it'd be a fairly light lift for us to support Runes as well once Casey finalizes those specs. So interesting solution for these token standards.
Totally.
Yeah, I think for us, I agree with what these guys said, but the main thing I think we should encourage is basically some level of experimentation, and then it's almost like some shit's going to work, some shit's not. Let the market kind of decide if they like it or not. Us as, I guess you could call us like the platform that's like user facing. We are sort of agnostic to some of these things, because ultimately, whatever is the thing that people really like and want to interact with, we'll try and build the nicest user experience to make that happen. And not all of it's going to work. I think we can all probably agree BRC20 is like kind of hard to use. But there was like an initial wave of a lot of excitement to see if this would be the way that fungibles could exist on Bitcoin. I'm also not sure yet. But for us, I think if we can allow some experimentation, and just the market will dictate basically what they like and what they don't like, and it's chill either way.
Totally. That's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin, is you can use it however you want to.
Permissionless.
Elizabeth asked about stamps. If you guys would humor me for a minute, in our audience here, how many people own an Ordinal? I'm curious. All right. Pretty good showing.
Who's got an OMB? Oh,
that's good. How about BRC20 token? Who's familiar with that? All right, we got a good handful. Cool. And Bitcoin, yeah. Bingo.
I said it's all the same thing. It was just like a technical statement. It's not in support or financial advice of any tokens.
Well, I think that's one of the coolest things about what the Ordinals market has grown into, and particularly with how the marketplaces have all evolved using PSBTs and on-chain trading activity, is that it truly brings a circular on-chain economy that's only accessible with Bitcoin. You have to own Bitcoin. You have to know how to use and manage UTXOs to participate in the Ordinals market, and you have to control your own wallet essentially. So it brings self-sovereignty, UTXO control, and more adoption just to Bitcoin worldwide. We've only got a couple minutes left here. ZK, you mentioned BitVM, which is one of the hottest, newest, most interesting experiments I've seen done on Bitcoin. I don't want to front run your next talk, but do you want to talk maybe a little bit about the creative uses of Ordinals you guys are seeing in terms of data, other use cases, real-world assets? What are the people who are stretching the bounds of what's possible with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about this in a few minutes, so I won't front run myself, and I'll let the panelists talk. But I think something you should look at, yesterday or 2 days ago, Project Spartacus, which was someone inscribing all of kind of Julian Assange, WikiLeaks Afghan war logs as somewhat of a protest, but really looking at Bitcoin and Ordinals kind of as the medium, as censorship-resistant, immutable images and data. And I think really that's the art is kind of a test net. It's obviously superior. There's a market. But when you start looking at inscriptions as data on top of Bitcoin that's secured by the entire Bitcoin network, I think that's really the future there. And you mentioned like BRC20, that helped a lot of people understand what indexing is. And now you kind of have that off-chain indexing with on-chain relationship that is kind of could really change how Bitcoin operates and expand the utility. But I'll leave it there because I got to talk in a few minutes on it.
Yeah, it's dope. So cool.
Just closing thoughts, or?
Sure. We got just a minute left. Closing thoughts, or maybe what
Elizabeth has some closing thoughts.
what you guys are most excited about in the Ordinals world from what you're seeing.
Well, so most recently, I have to say I really love rare sats. I think they're super fun, and I think right now we're kind of going through this culture and phase of bringing more fun to Bitcoin. And so I think it's great. They're bringing more collectors. They're bringing more, talent and potentially investors. So I think rare sats are great. Check them out if you haven't. I think also through an educational lens, they're great because it's bringing more awareness to different mathematical and historical attributes of Bitcoin. For example, with Epic Sats, this is the first Satoshi that's mined in a halving. And then people start to think, okay, well, what's a halving? And kind of go down that rabbit trail. So I think it's really great to really highlight these different attributes to Bitcoin. And would love to also say that Xverse has launched support for rare sats. So if you're curious, if you own a rare sat, you can actually just open up an Xverse wallet on your phone and restore your Bitcoin address, and it will pop up. You'll see if you have a rare sat. And if you don't like it, you can trade it on Magic Eden.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited about a lot of things, but I think the main thing is everyone's heard of Bitcoin. So that as a starting point is like fucking amazing, if I can just say that. And because of that, we have the best starting point of anything in crypto, right? So, and there's a reason why, we're doing this thing with like Asprey Bugatti, and that's happening on Bitcoin. It's not happening anywhere else. And what we are really good at is basically trying to bring a lot of users to come and use like a consumer product, and then working with creators to come and like launch things and interact with some of those users on the other side of the marketplace. So generally, that's where we're going to spend our time, and I think doing that on Bitcoin is probably one of the more exciting things that I think will be happening over the next couple of years.
Amen. ZK?
I thought I already did there.
Anything?
No, I think just viewing Ordinals as really, forget what you think about it. Remember, Bitcoin's an open source protocol. If you're telling someone how to use it, you're advocating for censorship in a way. And look at all this kind of experimental tech on top of Bitcoin as a way to onboard new users and pay miners fees and secure the network and spread the word. This shouldn't be controversial if you really understand the endpoint, and kind of Ordinals and inscriptions are aligned with the best interests of the Bitcoin network. Thanks.
Let's give these guys a huge round of applause. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Testing. Great. All right, everyone. Thanks a lot, everyone from Ordinal Opportunity. That was great. I enjoyed it a great deal. I'm going to wait for everyone to move around for another couple of seconds because we got a really interesting presentation coming up. All right, we got a couple of presentations, announcements, product descriptions coming up. Really interesting stuff that we have cooking in Bitcoin. So I'm going to introduce now Craig Sellers with Self, who's going to be talking about some innovations in transacting and identification. So everyone, please give a warm round of applause and a nice welcome to Craig. Please, Craig, come on up.
Thank you, sir. Good day, everyone. Welcome to Amsterdam. You guys may know me. I'm Craig Sellers, one of the founders of Tether. Obviously, everyone here knows the world's best and largest stablecoin out there. We learned a lot of lessons in the past 10 years or so about how to deploy cryptographically secure assets. Now, Tether, of course, is one of the largest fungible digital assets in the world, except for things like Bitcoin. Today, I'm going to talk about the world's most valuable non-fungible asset. And I'm going to start by describing the fact that the internet was built without an identity layer. Okay, it was meant to address devices, IP addresses for an Internet of Things, not people. You could hide 1 million people behind a single IP address. So in the beginning, you could stay anonymous. No one was tracking you. You weren't leaving breadcrumbs behind at all. You were simply a number that no one could associate with anybody else. In the early days of the internet, what you would do is you would create a new account with a website or a provider. You would use your username, your password, and uniquely identify yourself at that website. Your bank, where you get your passport, where you get your driver's license, your medical provider, your doctor. And every one of these were disparate. Each one was a centralized location holding your information. And they couldn't talk to one another. And that was actually a very good thing. Because as you progressed through the internet over the past few decades, you ended up with dozens, hundreds, thousands of different accounts and different passwords, okay, which became a honeypot for hackers. It became difficult to start remembering these things. Well, we now can use utilities. Now, for a while, besides just logging into things like your bank, websites came along like Zbook, Xbook, that wanted to consolidate all of those logins into a single use case, a single button that you could log in and track yourself online. Well, it wasn't just you tracking yourself. It was these third parties tracking you as well. You'd log in with Xbook. You'd log in with Ybook. You'd log in with whatever else. But in the process, you were leaving behind breadcrumbs for every activity that you did online, and they were tracking everything, making huge profiles about you, everything about you, the things that you wanted them to know and the things you didn't want them to know. It was a much better way of doing this. Instead of signing in with a third party, why not be able to simply sign in with yourself? Now, everyone here has a wallet, right? You're maintaining digital assets in your wallet. That wallet is, in fact, an attribute of your identity. And you can actually use that to log in to everything that you want. That's the magic. Imagine that your Bitcoin wallet actually contained not just digital assets, but identity assets for yourself. In our wallet, it's called the digital genome. It's a series of atoms and molecules, those atoms being snippets of information about yourself that have been verified by another third party, like a KYC provider, a driver's license verifier, your bank, your doctor, those that have information about you that they can share with you and that you can encrypt. So we put an anchor on the Bitcoin blockchain that points to a decentralized encrypted file store, in this case IPFS, and that contains all of your information that only you can access, but you can actually share with third parties. So imagine that your driver's license has been verified by a third party, by a Jumio, by a Netkey, someone that's actually gone through the KYC process of proving that you are who you say you are. They can now give back to you those identity assets as atoms, your first name, your last name, your street address, your age, the things that you might want to share with third parties. So that when you go to your bank, either for the first time or go to an exchange for the first time, instead of going through that laborious KYC process, which they're actually required to go through, instead they can request the information from you directly. It's been verified by a third party. In this case, your license verifier. They've given over a series of atoms that they've now proven who you are. And you can approve and decrypt to the bank that information. So now you have instant access to that service provider, that bank, that exchange that fulfills their KYC legal requirements. And now a part of your profile there is verified information from a third party. This means we have simplified 2FA, out of the box, two-factor authentication that doesn't require your phone number. You've got completely open source technology underpinning all of this. The Bitcoin blockchain. We have a protocol we created called MDIP, Multi-Dimensional Identity Protocol, which is hosted at keychain.org, and SDKs are available today. You have the ability to share and request data from other users, because every identity on this network, just like every Bitcoin address, is a peer to one another. Your bank is your peer. Your phone is your peer. Your government is your peer. And everyone can make interactions between one another and build a mesh network of identities that can all communicate easily over an open source platform. It's a simple integration, less than a day's work if you're an integrator. If you want to be a provider and a tester of information, a requester of information, you drop in JavaScript and it talks to the whole network. It's turnkey encryption, even for legacy companies. Again, this is the same cryptography that we use on the Bitcoin blockchain, that we use on Ethereum, we use on any blockchain. We can inherit all of that security and all of what we've learned over the past decade to secure your identity. And forthcoming is a user-centered marketplace where all of your information can now have value. You can actually exchange your information in exchange for someone paying you for your assets, your identity assets. Today, it's being bought and sold without any participation from you. There are companies making hundreds of billions of dollars on your information. Now, you recollect that information yourself, and you're in charge of who gets to see it, and when, and how much it's worth. So again, the internet was built without an identity layer. But now we have a new one. And that's the most valuable, non-fungible asset in the world. You. So, we are now opening up an open beta at selfid.com. We've been in stealth for 3 years, working on this pretty much nonstop. Actually, the whole self-ID team is here with us. So if you see any of us want to ask questions, come grab us. But definitely stop at selfid.com, sign up for our open beta, and begin taking complete control over your decentralized digital identity. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for that, Craig. That was really interesting. We got about a minute or two gap here before ZK Shark comes up, who was just here 2 minutes ago in the last panel. He'll be talking about the Bitcoin layer being used as a data layer. He's got a pretty interesting talk to give. We got about a minute to get this set up, and I'll wait for him to come here. There we go. There we go. All right, we're going to go a little ahead. ZK, come on up. Everyone, please give a warm round again for ZK Shark.
That's good. Testing, testing. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is ZK Shark, or I go by ZK Shark. And, I promise, unlike the last panel, if you thought that one was boring, you're going to find this incredibly dense overload of information. But all joking aside, I was kind of very intentional not to use the word ordinals in the title here. I think as Bitcoiners, you really have the responsibility to look at where Bitcoin is headed, look at the potential of Bitcoin, and build towards that. And sometimes that requires ignoring the current use of the technology. Think about when Satoshi wrote the white paper. Bitcoin was not competing with countries for currencies at that time. You kind of have to believe and build towards that. And really, the talk here is on-chain evolution, Bitcoin as a data layer. And before you start looking at a Bitcoin as a data layer, you really have to go back to the roots, go back to block one. The first block, mined by Satoshi, included a message. Everyone is, somewhat familiar with that message. Chancellor on the second brink of ballot for banks, right? Arguably, that was the first time that Bitcoin was used as a data layer, or including kind of not strictly financial information regarding transactions. And really, to understand why Bitcoin is a valuable data layer, you have to start with the roots of looking at what an open source protocol is. After all, Bitcoin is an open source protocol. And all open source protocols kind of have one thing in common, as survival is the most important part. If the protocol isn't surviving, it's just dead, right? In order to survive, you have to constantly evolve, you have to constantly adapt. And you either have to adapt the technology, the people using it, the marketing, but kind of look at open source protocols as a living thing. And you kind of, as a contributor to open source protocols or someone using it, kind of have to help it get, eat. You have to help it grow. And in Bitcoin's case, this is about unlocking people, unlocking future utilities, unlocking future use cases for Bitcoin. And as someone, contributing on an open source protocol, you have to ask yourself, what is in the best interest of the protocol? And kind of put your feelings aside for a second. But to understand why Bitcoin is actually a superior data layer, you have to start with the Bitcoin network itself. Data on Bitcoin really inherits a lot of the security features of the Bitcoin network. So we're all familiar with them, right? Bitcoin's decentralized. There's not one CEO, there's not one government, there's not one board of directors that's kind of dictating what happens. It's permissionless. This is a very important part when you consider data. It's permissionless. Anyone could use it. There's any country. There's no one gatekeeping it. And in terms of mediums of speech, this is a really important quality, but we'll touch on it in a little bit. And if you look at Bitcoin network differently, you could kind of think about it as like a global broadcast layer, like an AM radio across the world. And it's public, right? Everything is transparent. And as Bitcoin as a data layer inherits all of these kind of essential properties that the network has itself. And the best part is that it's not protected by shitty encryption, username, password. It's protected by encryption and math on the Bitcoin network. And to understand why it's a superior kind of data layer, you have to look at the current data landscape. And I'll just run through a few comparisons. And when I say data, just think about your phone, the photos on your phone as an example, right? The current data landscape is, if you looked at it as like a crypto, it's just a shitcoin. But it's a shitcoin with a massive market cap. What I mean by that is data storage is incredibly centralized, right? You have a handful of corporations that you guys are paying every single month to manage your data. If you try to move it, they hold it hostage over your head. And the biggest thing is they're not really good custodians of data, right? Everyone here has probably been a victim of some type of identity hack or their data getting leaked outside of that. And when you start looking at Bitcoin, comparing it with data, if you start looking at kind of comparing hold mic close to the mouth, okay. This is way harder than a Twitter space, it's like an IRL Twitter space. Yeah. But yeah, and then kind of it's centralized data, right? So all your photos, images, whatever it is, it's kind of being maintained by corporations that have almost predatory pricing models, and they hold your data hostage kind of when you try to change it. And the last thing is they're selling your data, right? They're kind of scrubbing it, personal information. It's not really your data. And when you now kind of wrapping it in with blockchain, you have to think about NFTs. Arguably, NFTs are kind of the first type of data on blockchain that really received traction. And when you think about data, it's just something like art being inscribed, on NFTs, I'm sorry. But the problem with NFTs, it's not on Bitcoin. It's on a weaker network, right? And then the other problem is that it's like a shitty standard. They're mutable. Most NFTs are actually just kind of referencing off-chain data with an on-chain token. That off-chain data kind of comes into those problems that I mentioned with centralization of data. It's mutable. It could get hacked, et cetera. And then kind of when I first discovered Ordinals, my disappointment in NFTs really turned into enthusiasm for Ordinals. Oh, there's the mic. Okay, I see it. And the biggest kind of once you understand the properties of inscriptions and Ordinals, you could really start understanding why it's kind of superior form of communication versus kind of current options out there. And the biggest thing is that inscriptions and Ordinals are immutable. And when I say Ordinals, it's the kind of numbering series of Satoshis, numbering mechanism, and inscriptions are actually that raw data inserted into the witness. But yeah, they're immutable. And think about as human beings, when when were you around where you could actually just create something and it can't be destroyed no matter what you do? You know, anything physical, it could get burned, gets degraded, lost, stolen. But, you know, this is kind of new technology for humans where you cannot destroy ordinals. You know, you cannot burn them. They will always publicly exist. It's kind of like a completely encapsulated type of messaging system. But, you know, what else can you really have that cannot be destroyed, if you think about it? And then they're fully on-chain, right? Kind of, we talked about it before, but inscriptions are not referencing off-chain data. Everything kind of completely lives inside of the Bitcoin network, inside of every full node for the most part. And it's permissionless, right? And when you think about it as a kind of a communication of layer of speech or data storage, that's one of the best kind of anti-censorship properties that anyone could use it as much as they want. And when you start thinking about limitations too, you know, with recursive inscriptions, which is the ability to reference a previous inscription, you kind of have the file size constraint that of uploading data to the blockchain removed. And you also have like kind of new technology like reinscriptions or markdown HTML. But, you know, this is kind of starting to transform Bitcoin as, you know, a ledger of history, a ledger of kind of personal data or whatever data you want to put up there versus just, you know, thinking about ordinals as some JPEG type technology. And as you kind of understand the properties of inscriptions and ordinals, I think it really starts to change how we interact with data in two main ways. The first way is kind of, I touched on it, is data storage. It's kind of like the financial mission of Bitcoin is, in my view, is to separate kind of the government and money. With Bitcoin as a data layer, you could kind of separate centralized data storage and make it decentralized. And obviously, the bigger the corporations are, the more likely they are to kind of cooperate with the government and just not be kind of the best steward of your data. You much rather have it on Bitcoin. And then the second way I think like inscriptions and ordinals kind of change how we interact with data is on how we use open source protocols. And really, I kind of use Bitcoin as an example. Let's just go through a quick hypothetical. Let's say that you know, we all get nuked, and 100 years from now, 2 aliens find a Bitcoin node. They find 2 Bitcoin nodes, they sync them up, and they recover the chain. Then let's just say, like, 2 years after that, do they get in a huge block size war with another planet? And you'll see where I'm going with this. Then the other hypothetical is 2 aliens find 2 nodes. They sync them all up. They have all the Bitcoin. They recovered the chain. Everyone's happy. And then inside of the nodes are actually all of Satoshi's posts on Bitcoin Talk, all of kind of the key discourse around GitHub. And, you know, really what is kind of the responsibility of Bitcoiners in terms of that? You know, I would argue that the core discourse around Bitcoin is almost as important as the code itself. And with inscriptions, you kind of have the property to preserve that code and also the commentary. I've already inscribed about 90% of Satoshi's posts on Bitcoin Talk. And, you know, I don't know in the future how this is really going to be referenced, but it's, you know, there's another kind of story where in 2010, before the pizza transaction, there was someone trying to buy, for 500 Bitcoin, a banner, just a banner of Bitcoin, like a little drawing. And when you go on Bitcoin Talk, you could see the address, you could see the Bitcoin was sent. And then when you try to look at the actual picture of what was sent, it's a Dropbox server not found error. And really, you have to think, is all of Bitcoin Talk going to look like that one day? And with ordinals and inscriptions, you kind of have a medium to preserve all of the core discourse, the core code around Bitcoin with Bitcoin, right? It's like, why is the most kind of decentralized system known to humanity relying on centralized protocols like GitHub, the Bitcoin dev mailing email list for core updates? As kind of governments get more aggressive and Bitcoin grows, you just have to expect censorship and kind of more efforts to fuck over Bitcoin from that point of view. And, you know, we are in Amsterdam after all. This is where Tornado Cash developers were held in jail without a formal cause charge for months. And GitHub has worked with the government before taking code off, right? So it's like, as Bitcoiners, I think you have a responsibility to really look forward and kind of mitigate potential risk by really fortifying Bitcoin with inscriptions and ordinals. What else? And then there's some improvements you make also, where instead of a username password type of Web 2 credentialing system, you have a public address private key type credentialing system. And kind of with AI, there's different types of risks that comes into Bitcoin. Why can I think about it? Why can I not just spam the Bitcoin Talk or Bitcoin Dev mailing list 1,000 messages every single second for the next 100 years? It would kind of be pretty annoying and fuck it up. But with Bitcoin, you kind of have an anti-bot, anti-spam mechanism built in. If you think about it in terms of like Elon Musk, when he bought Twitter, one of the first things he did was put a small fee on the accounts, and that kind of mitigated the botting problem at the time. Same thing with Bitcoin. It costs money to inscribe. It costs money to interact with the network. But I think this is an advantage, and really it's a way to kind of use crypto to improve the way we interact and get away from the password, username, credential systems and use proper encryption to secure these protocols. You could also kind of develop a reputation for the public address if you want credibility, or you could just kind of keep it anonymous and use fresh addresses each time. And then really, I don't want to get too in the weeds. I want you guys to look at the broader applications of this technology. And I'll just share a personal story. My house was in a hurricane like 10 years ago. I lost almost every single one of my personal family photos. And yeah, it may not make sense to inscribe them all, but if inscriptions were around, I definitely would have inscribed a few. And think about it as humans, if you could upload something to a ledger or just upload something to a publicly viewable website, and it's going to live longer than you. Your great-great-grandchildren could potentially see it if they want to. And this is really just a type of technology that humans have not really interacted with before. I'll use Michael Saylor's example. We're at a Bitcoin conference. Everyone loves Saylor. Michael Saylor said, if someone's worth $200 million, how much do you think they would pay to inscribe their last living will and testament into Bitcoin? If they're worth a couple $100 million, it's worthwhile for that to be preserved and protected within the Bitcoin network. But it also has the potential to kind of make the fee market on Bitcoin more subjective. And what I mean by that is they may not be in a rush. Really, a lot of Bitcoin transactions are technical. What do I have to pay to get into the next block? But when you're inscribing data, you don't have the same type of urgency in most cases, and it can actually help a lot with security budget kind of conversation. And then also just kind of there's a huge humanitarian element. And I think as Bitcoiners, you have to kind of advocate against censorship and protect, how we could really advocate for those causes. But, think about what I said that can't be destroyed. How many books have been burned, Why could you not just inscribe books, inscribe academic papers, inscribe like DNA sequencing? I mean, all of this stuff can be on chain and can be protected by Bitcoin instead of like centralized private servers. And then one of the last things kind of I want to touch on is permissionless. Anyone in the world can interact with Bitcoin. And when you start thinking about kind of messaging systems or communication on top of Bitcoin as a data layer, it really has the potential to be a voice for the voiceless in blockchain, meaning someone may be able to interact with Bitcoin when they can interact with nothing else. And I think as Bitcoiners, as people that are kind of in open source protocol, you have a responsibility to kind of, protect and build on this type of information. Sorry, this fucking mask and glasses, jeez. It's foggy as fuck, can't see shit. But yeah, in conclusion though, it's, Bitcoin is almost ready. Thank you guys. Bitcoin's almost ready, and I think there's a few untaps that come off. Think about if you start doing ZK proofs on top of Bitcoin, now you have the potential to kind of secure private data that could be unlocked with a private key on top of Bitcoin. And that's when I think this really starts to, potentially could look like a Salesforce on top of Bitcoin once corporations or, once you could put private data onto Bitcoin. And, code is free speech. Free speech is code. And I sincerely believe we have to use Bitcoin to fortify and protect the network inside the network and not have the most decentralized system in the world rely on websites that have been censored by governments already. And when we have the tools to do it, it's everyone in this room's job, I think, to really understand this technology and figure out how it could protect Bitcoin. And yeah, I think the more you kind of dig into inscriptions and ordinals, the more it's just a perfect layer on top of Bitcoin to store data, to store personal information, to store photos, and really protect humanity in the sense of being the voice for the voiceless and being a message there that will never get destroyed. I'm ZK Shark. I'm the founder of OMB. OMB cannot be stopped. Free Ross. And thanks everyone for listening to me ramble.
Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.